more than casual observers of the law and people who are obsessed with courtroom or legal procedures, in part because they've been nailed by the police or somebody they love have been, or because they're just very curious. Maybe they are interested in being lawyers or judges or involved in the process somehow, but they will understand the term probable cause. I think most people understand probable cause, at least at the elementary level. And probable cause, as you may remember, is the standard by which police are supposed to invade the Fourth Amendment, your privacy. They have to have reasonable suspicion or probable cause. Reasonable is a pretty strict guideline, although police do whatever they can, whenever they can, over time, to bend that, stretch it out of proportion, and like a rubber band, it very often snaps back over time, but it does take time, and I suspect the same thing will happen with the registry and with the sex stings as they are being prosecuted, namely as fishing expeditions rather than following up on real people who are going after children and who are making that plain from the get-go. So it's kind of interesting then when the police kicked in my door on the morning of Friday, August 22nd after 8 a.m., a few minutes after 8 a.m., and they put me in handcuffs and they searched diligently. They were taking pictures. They were immediately filming. It's amazing how organized they were. If only they had been as organized on the original complaint, because everything that they have in the affidavit, they can find by going online and taking pictures of it. In other words, anything that they might feel is incriminating, they could take a picture of it, a screenshot. They didn't need my devices, but they searched for the majority of the time to find everything, including my phone, which had carelessly fallen into a box when I was running down the stairs, because I have boxes open. I'm doing various projects. I'm trying to clean things up. But of course, that became you're trying to hide it. And lack of cooperation doesn't necessarily mean hiding it. One of the things you should never do, even though they ask so nicely, is give them your password. Never do that. I did that because I knew I was innocent, and look what happened to me. So never ever do such a thing. Make them work for it. But it still underscores the question here, what exactly were they looking for if they had it in hand right away? They could have made charges right away. They could have put charges against me, but they didn't. And I suspect the reason was one of two. Either they're attempting to intimidate me because they don't have a whole bunch in their mind, or they're not confident about what they had. Same thing in 2018. I was in jail for 4 days and they never even bothered to search my house. Why? Because they thought they had a something and they realized they had a nothing. So they had to search my house, which they also found nothing. So they turned to expanding the indictment, making a claim which I now believe is extremely false, even more false than before, namely that I sent a picture deliberately to an account that I asked to be deactivated because I thought it was an underage person who was being hurt potentially online. And none of my talk was sexual in nature. So, but nobody was interested in that example of trying to actually help someone. In fact, I thought it was very funny. And I've heard people on here argue, well, everybody uses that excuse. Well, everybody uses lots of excuses, but sometimes those excuses are actually facts. They're actually true. So again, we go back to the events of August 22nd, Friday, around 8:08 a.m. What were they looking for if they had everything? What was their reasonable suspicion? What was their probable cause? Was it simply relying on what a vigilante said? And by the way, even though I'm not giving away the entire game pending litigation, let me ask you a very related question that has to do with the registry and registration requirements, so the scholarly among you can look it up. If you applied for a job and went online, filled out a profile, as we all have to do, username and all that kind of crap. You can't walk into a place these days. If you do and get hired, if you do, they hand you a little card and say, hey, apply here. Don't bother us. But if you applied for a position and they did not hire you, what would you call that? Would you call that employment? I don't think most people would call that employment. So again, what was the reasonable suspicion? What was the probable cause? They either took my stuff to try and intimidate me, or they're trying to put something on those devices to make a case. That's the sort of thing they do frequently. If you don't believe me, look it up. I'm still hopeful I'll get a forensic analyst on here to discuss some matters, but we've all been quite busy fighting police corruption.